live and YouTube live and podcast everywhere you are online. So glad to have you along with us this morning. It is State of the Union Day. The State of the Union address is this evening. I will be commenting on it a little bit on social media tonight. The State of the State address, Governor Mary Fallon's State of the State address, is this coming Monday, a week from yesterday at noon or thereabouts, and we will be at that time, next Monday, we will be covering that live right here. You'll be able to watch that live right here, a special edition of the Trent England Show with running commentary. Not just, I don't know. We'll let the governor have her say, but we will feel free to interject as well. I mean, these things get tedious, right? So you don't want to just watch the thing straight up. And so State of the Union tonight, State of the Union wrap up tomorrow on the show, and on Monday a special Trent England Show where we will be covering the State of the State live right here. Just got breaking news actually this morning, just 20 minutes ago, that the Oklahoma Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, has agreed to hear the challenge to the gross production tax proposed ballot measure. Now, this hasn't, there's been a little bit of press about this, kind of been stepped on by other efforts to raise your taxes. But this is the state question that would add 5% to whatever the gross production tax is on new wells, on the first 3 years of oil wells. And so this is we had talked on the radio show about the fact that that there was a challenge to that, a legal challenge to that, some real questions about that measure and how it's written, and the what's called the gist, right, the description that would be, if they do get to the point where they're gathering signatures, that would be on those signature gathering forms. That has to be accurate, because that's all people usually know about the measure when they're signing. And so those challenges will be heard by the Oklahoma Supreme Court on March 1st. And again, I think if they have the cameras in the courtroom at that time, we will probably either carry that live, or right after that wraps up, provide some live commentary for you on that important Oklahoma Supreme Court case. But today we have TSET. We're going to talk TSET on the program. TSET says, don't smoke, get drunk. And I had somebody, I will admit, sometimes part of what we talk about on the show is driven by what goes on out there in social media, just what I see people saying. I had somebody yesterday pestering me that it's so unfair. You say that TSET is pushing people to drink, and I've gone to their website, and that's just not true, Trent. So we actually have a bunch of TSET web pages we're going to show you this morning, and you can decide for yourself. Are they advertising booze on TSET's website? And look, I'm not a prohibitionist by any measure. Although this is, despite what some people say, this is straight water. It's not even coffee. It's straight water here. I've taken to limiting myself on coffee, but look, it's a totally different question. Do you think a category of behavior is either okay, or even do you think a category of behavior is morally good or morally bad? Those are totally different questions. Then should government either prohibit something or subsidize it? And TSET subsidizes advertising for alcohol. TSET actually provides, they straight up provide it. They provide advertising for alcohol. TSET, we're going to get to that this morning. I will show you. You can decide for yourself, but I'm not just going to tell you, I'll show you. We also have a new fascist student group at OSU. We're going to get to that in just a moment here. And some other states have already begun their legislative sessions this year, which means their governors have already given their State of the State addresses. And I have a couple gems for you from other governors' State of the State addresses. We'll see. We want to create. We want to create some context for Governor Mary Fallon's State of the State address. And we want to point out some of the best of what's going on in other states so we can see, we want to raise the bar for our own leaders, don't we? Should we do that? Is that appropriate that we do that here on the show? Well, we're going to do it anyway. I think it's appropriate. We're going to do that here on the Trent England Show, and a preview of the State of the Union address and what ought to be said tonight by President Trump. We'll get there. But the new fascist student group at Oklahoma State University, as reported by my friends over at Campus Reform, the Leadership Institute, sponsors Campus Reform. It's a great website to find out what's going on in higher education, or so-called higher education. And it's a national website, but they're covering what's going on right here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Unfortunately enough, we have a new student group there calling itself the 4%. So, it used to be, it wasn't that many years ago. You had the left-wing groups calling themselves the 99%. But I guess they've dwindled. No, I think 4% refers to some percentage of particular minorities at Oklahoma State University. I think that's what they're trying to refer to. But they have released a list of demands. And look, this group has come out as a fascist student group because, you look at their demands, right? Judge them not on what they say, judge them on what they do, on what they ask for, on what they want the school to do. They are asking the school, demanding, I guess, it's a list of demands. They're demanding that the school create a thought police. Well, let's back up from that. They want a brainwashing program, diversity training, that would be mandatory for all students, for all teaching assistants, for all faculty, for all staff members, and of course they want to control what's said in this brainwashing program. I mean, look. Well, we'll get to what the right answer to their. Do they have legitimate grievances? I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time in Stillwater, Oklahoma. It's too frustrating because you drive around up there after reading Burns Hargis saying that they're so strapped for cash they don't have any money, and you see all the construction and you see all the nice buildings, and it causes too much cognitive dissonance for me. I have to limit my time in Norman and Stillwater because I spend too much time reading the whining and listening to the tiny violins of Burns Hargis and President Boren. What else do they want? They want a thought police at OSU. This is where it gets into straight up fascism. They want an amendment to the Student Code of Conduct. Apparently there's already a social justice legislation section of the Student Code of Conduct at Oklahoma State University to make it punishable to be racially insensitive. If they deem that something is insensitive, they want it to be punishable. Punishable by whom? Well, they want a quote, bias response team that will, quote, impose sanctions on individuals. These are look, why beat around the bush? These are fascist students at Oklahoma State University. At least they acknowledge that they represent a small percentage of the student body there. Who are fascists. But look, do they have legitimate grievances? Again, I don't. I'm sure that there are people at OSU, as there are at any large university, who are jerks, right? I'm sure there are people who are jerks. I'm sure there are people who say insensitive things, racially related and otherwise, right? I'm sure there are people who have all kinds of crazy, kooky ideas. That's sort of the point of a university, isn't it? To some degree, that's the point of a university, is you're bringing in a bunch of young people, a bunch of 17, 18, 19-year-old people when they start out for the most part, and you're bringing them all together, and they're going to have all kinds of different backgrounds and all kinds of different beliefs. And the idea of a university used to be, at least the idea of a liberal education used to be, that you present to people the best ideas of brought together over human history, the best ideas. You encourage people to test things against reason and even against truth, right? And hopefully over time through that process, through letting people hear ideas that are good ideas, bad ideas, things that are likely true and things that are almost obviously not true, right? That as you put people through that process that we used to call education, we talked a little bit about education yesterday, and the fact that, there are a lot of things they plant a flag in it. They say, this is education, and they don't want us to ask any questions from there, right? But what this student group is calling for is the exact opposite of that process. It is the exact opposite of education. is what they want. They want to tell people what to think, and they want to punish people for thinking things that they regard as being insensitive. And you know what? Probably a lot of the things that they're upset about, again, I don't know for sure, but probably a lot of the things they're upset about are perfectly legitimate, right? But the fact that they don't have the confidence, as students in a university to simply take better ideas, right? To simply make the argument, right, in that educational process for something better, for something true, against ideas that are false or against attitudes that are harmful or counterproductive. The fact that they don't have that kind of confidence suggests that there's a problem in the university. And obviously there's a problem in the university. Most Americans recognize that is true. The real risk here, by the way, and sometimes I have conservatives tell me, inside, these are sort of ivory tower conservatives. You want to know what ivory tower conservatives tell me? In hushed tones, they'll sort of take me aside and say, Trent, you're really critical of higher education. And, you bring up all these things that go on and all these crazy, look, they say, I know, these are crazy things that go on in higher education. But you shouldn't talk so much about it. Because the problem is that higher education is really important at some level, right? We need educated people. You get this a lot from the Chamber of Commerce crowd, right? They say, yeah, look, some of these students, maybe they won't use the F word, right? They won't say they're fascist, right? But yeah, these students are, they're asking for things that are wrong, and these things are crazy, and this is counterproductive. But Trent, you got to play this down. Stop telling people. Don't tell the taxpayers this. Don't tell the parents this, right? Because when they find out, then they turn against higher education in general, right? And we don't want anti-intellectualism and this populism, and people start making fun of universities. And we've just, we've got to take the good with the bad. We've got to let Burns Hargis, do his thing, and we got to let David Boren do his thing, and we've got to pander to all of these crazy special interest radical groups out there. We got to pander to these students, pat them on their heads, and pretend like we think that they make sense, right? Even though we know they're nuts. And this is what they say, right? We know they're nuts, but don't tell people that. Don't tell people what's going on, because it makes higher education look bad. And you know what my answer is to them? They're part of the problem, right? These ivory tower conservatives who want to go around, protecting the bubbles, right, and keeping taxpayers ignorant, right? They're the state like Oklahoma, they are the cause of the problem. Right? Because but for cowardly conservative so-called leaders, higher education in a state like Oklahoma couldn't get away with this garbage, right? We actually, in a state like Oklahoma, where we have so much common sense, where we have so many people who, if you go out and you ask them what education should be about, they can actually give you a reasonable answer, right? Unlike if you wander around in San Francisco and ask what education's about protesting, and it's about smoking pot, and it's about right? Most Oklahomans have a much more grounded sense of what we ought to be doing, even in our universities, right? And if our legislators just weren't so cowed by these ivory tower conservative voices out there who say, we got to let them do their thing in Norman and let them do their thing in Stillwater. And you know who the real losers are? The real losers are students in these universities. You talk to the average Oklahoma student, they don't want anything to do with these fascist student groups, with this crazy left-wing indoctrination. They don't want to have anything to do with it, right? They keep their heads down. They go through the process of getting their degree, right? But they watch as their student fees are siphoned off, as tax dollars are siphoned off, as tuition dollars are siphoned off to pay for these diversity programs and thought police and hopefully not a bias response team at OSU. We'll see what Burns Hargis says. He'll probably tell them, I wish I could, but I don't have the money. Which I'm fine. If he wants to turn it into a money thing, that's okay with whatever it takes to keep the thoughtful police from actually running around at OSU. But look, this is what I always say on higher education. I take education in general, and higher education in particular, so seriously that nobody is ever going to convince me that I should shut up and sit down and just let them do their thing. I think higher education is so important that I think we should hold them to a higher standard. And I think that taxpayers should ask questions. I think that parents should ask questions. Tuition payers, taxpayers should ask questions. And I think when they do stupid stuff, we should shame them, right? David Boren should be ashamed that he accepts money from the communist Chinese government to run a Chinese studies program that's a whitewash in Norman, Oklahoma. David Boren should be ashamed. Right? People should feel uncomfortable talking to him at cocktail parties because he's willing to accept money from a totalitarian government that is obviously partly about shaping a false narrative of what actually goes on in China from a base in Norman, Oklahoma. It's a disgrace and an insult to the taxpayers. And it is a part of David Boren's legacy that will live on after he's gone in June? From the University of Oklahoma. It's disgraceful and despicable, right? And if students at OSU think that the way to combat bad ideas is through fascism and thought police, right? That is not a good reflection of OSU. And we should be willing to stand up and say and ask Burns Hargis, what's going on at your university that you have students running around who think that fascism, right, that intellectual totalitarianism is the right answer to bad ideas? So look, I'm glad campus reform is out there. I'm glad that they are bringing this to and look, people talk, this is the other thing you get from the chamber. Well, we've got to raise taxes because the New York Times and the Washington Post, they say that Oklahoma is a backward state because we don't have a big government like New York and Connecticut and Illinois and California. And so we just got to raise, I don't want to, but we've got to raise taxes because, when I go to national chamber events or national bankers conferences, people, what's wrong with Oklahoma? You don't have a big enough government in Oklahoma. I read it in the Washington Post. And you hear this from people at the Chamber of Commerce. Well, we just got to be a little more like California, and then they'll leave us alone. They'll stop making fun of us. At these national ivory tower meetings that I go to, they'll stop asking me questions that I don't know how to answer. Well, we're going to help. We help them as part of the service we do on the show. Is we try to help people answer those kind of questions. We actually have a better idea about how to do government in Oklahoma. We actually have a lot of better ideas about how to build a state and build a free society that honors individual Oklahomans rather than turning more and more power over to the political elite. We actually have some better ideas in Oklahoma than they have in California. And if people want to live in California, go live in California. Go pay taxes in California. More power to you, right? If the chamber crowd wants to get up and go move to California, I'll chip in for the moving truck. I'll do it. I'll put some money on the table, right? For these kind of folks, right? Who tell, we've got to give in. But look, what makes Oklahoma look bad is that we're supposedly a conservative state, and you've got websites here talking about the fact that we have people running around in our universities calling for fascism, the same as they have in other states, right? And you've got, Texas would not accept money from the communist Chinese at the University of Texas, in Austin of all places. And we do it in Norman, Oklahoma every day, right? This is crazy. This makes us look bad. Why can't we focus on things like that make us look bad? Okay, I got to move on from this. TSET. So look, I mentioned this social media flack that I got the other day from somebody. Well, TSET's just about tobacco. They just help people quit smoking, Trent. You don't understand. They told me so. It was really I went to their website and they said they're really good people. So don't try to convince me otherwise. Look, I'm sure they're really good people, by the way. I'm sure they're wonderful people. But look, and I want to give a shout out to Paul Monies at Oklahoma Watch. Paul Monies has a great, both sides of the story on TSET, explains how TSET works. A great story over at Oklahoma Watch. A good piece. I'm sure we'll go back to it in the future, and hopefully we can have Paul Monies on this new video program. We've had him on the radio before to talk about things like TSET and other state government issues. But look, they've got this up there. I just want to real quick go through this one TSET website that. This is their Free the Night website. TSET has spent over $1 million on this. And one of the things that was said to me is they don't advertise. They're not pushing people to drink. Well, look, they're pushing people to drink. And again, I don't, it's a free country, I think. It's a, we're supposed to have individual freedom. That means treating adults like adults. I'm not, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way. But state government has no place promoting drinking alcohol, right? Right? I mean, that's just a straightforward thing, right? Why would we spend, and this is what TSET does. Okay, so we have the Free the Night website listing the partners here, listing all the, which are, these are all, actually there is one of these that does not allow drinking, but all of the rest of these are drinking establishments, right? One of them is an underage gay bar, and so it's an underage gay bar that TSET promotes here, and so they don't allow drinking because it's underage. But the rest of these are, these are places they make all their money selling booze. I mean, that's what they do, and TSET is giving them free advertising. But it's not just that. You go to Whiskey Chicks here, right? And this, what do we find if we go to this is all a TSET website. This is all paid for with TSET dollars, right? These are state dollars. They belong to you. They belong to me as Oklahoma residents and taxpayers. And what do they say? This is it's a good place to come for cold and hot cocktails, right? And to enjoy the friendly female staff, right? So TSET, I guess they're not just they're also, TSET is also spending state dollars to advertise the friendly female staff. What else do we have here? We have New Age Renegade. Do we have that one? Okay, so we've got that one here. It says, don't forget about happy hour. Again, this is not the bar's website. This is TSET's website. It says, don't forget about happy hour every day of the week, 4 to 8 p.m. You can buy a shot and get a free domestic beer. So there we go. TSET advertising booze. That's what they're doing, right? Inner Circle Vodka Bar, right? Specializing in vodka. Okay, the website goes on to talk about how they specialize in vodka, which, for some Oklahomans, we should point out that's very strong alcohol. If you're not familiar with that, right? And finally, Apothecary 39, right? Being advertised. Again, this is a state government website. Oklahoma City's favorite upscale LGBT bar. Aren't there supposed to be? This is 2018. Aren't there supposed to be a bunch more letters in there? I don't. Anyhow, sorry, I'm getting off track. Handcrafted cocktails, local beer, wine, and on and on and on. Right? So look, these are state government web pages set up by TSET encouraging people to drink. It's my only. Aren't they encouraging people to drink? How can anybody tell me, harass me on social media, say, well, TSET doesn't tell people. They're telling people to drink. They're telling people to go out to happy hour and, get a free beer. Look, I don't think this is complicated stuff, right? TSET, don't smoke, get drunk. And by the way, you want to know the little secret about these establishments? Most of them, because I know, I've never been to any of these, by the way. For the record, I don't know why that is. I just don't get out that much. But I know people, right, who have been to a number of these establishments. I've asked around. You want to know the secret? Most of these places provide a place to smoke. It may be outside, maybe a patio, but they have a smoking area somewhere, right? They're not saying you can't ever smoke. They're just saying you can't smoke in the main part of the facility, but people are still going there and smoking. They're just not smoking in the main part of the facility. So, look, it's not, this is again, we've talked about this with TSET. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but this is a program set up because they have too much money. Right? And we have to be willing to look at government agencies and recognize some of them are underfunded. TSET is not underfunded. TSET has too much money. What's the evidence? The evidence is that they waste it on silly things, dumb things that make no sense. Right? And we should, as Oklahomans and through our legislators, we should be able to hold them politically accountable, should we not? We should be able to go and say, look, we want you to keep doing the things that make sense, keep doing the things that are important, but we want to take the rest of the money and we want to do something of higher value with it. And the fact that they get all bent out of shape over that is, I guess, on the one hand, very understandable. Because they see it, the people who work there and the board of TSET, it's their own little fiefdom, it's their own little, $1.1 billion toy chest, right? But look, it's not complicated. And that's why, there are, as Paul Monies points out in his Oklahoma Watch article today, there are a lot of bills. I think, what does Paul say? There are something like, he says it somewhere in here, there are a whole bunch of pieces of legislation to change how TSET works, over 10. So good, good for the legislature. Good. There are a lot of legislators out there trying to do something more common sense than spend state dollars advertising happy hour and friendly female waitresses, which is what TSET's doing right now. Okay, so State of the State Address. I told you Governor Fallon's State of the State Address is next Monday. We will cover it live here February 5th. We'll cover it live here on the Trent England Show. It's going to be great. It's going to be a party. We've got some ideas. We're going to make it fun. We're going to try to make State of the State speeches great again here on the Trent England Show. You think we can do that? And if you have ideas, shoot me your ideas, post them in the comments, whatever. Send me your ideas for how to make the State of the State fun again. But Governor Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, gave his State of the State address on January 9th in Tallahassee. And one of the things that Governor Scott is calling for in Florida, he wants to make it harder to raise taxes in the great state of Florida. He wants a supermajority requirement, taxpayer protection, supermajority requirement to increase taxes in the great state of Florida. Good for Governor Scott. Good for Floridians. They're trying to be more like Oklahoma. They've already got a panhandle. Now they need protections for taxpayers in their state constitution. Good for Rick Scott in Florida, calling for supermajorities to raise taxes in his State of the State address. How about Iowa? Iowa. Well, before I tell you about Iowa, can we bounce over to that? Let's see. We've got the Oklahoman. Can we pull up the image from the Oklahoman, the headline? Okay, so we got the Oklahoman headline pulled up, and this is a Tulsa World story. It ran in the Tulsa World, ran in the Oklahoman. Tulsa World headline's a little bit different, but about the fact that the legislature in Oklahoma was worried that if there was federal tax reform, and of course the regular session last year met when tax reform was just being sketched out, right? Tax reform didn't pass until December. The legislative session ended in May, but Oklahoma legislators were concerned that if there was federal tax reform, it might result in not just a federal tax cut for Oklahomans, it might also cause, because state tax law is oftentimes connected to or uses concepts in federal tax law. And so they were worried that if the Trump administration and Mitch McConnell and Speaker Ryan, if they actually passed tax reform at the federal level, they were worried that that would result in a tax cut at the state level in Oklahoma. They were worried you might get a tax cut at the state level in addition to the tax cut at the federal level. So they changed that. And the Oklahoman headline, of course, most Oklahoma headlines are written by Texans. They're actually written by people in Austin, Texas. The Oklahoman outsources their headline writing, as well as some of their other layout functions to people in Austin, Texas. And so it's no surprise that, look at that headline, right? Save the state money? No. It kept more Oklahoman dollars in state government. It kept Oklahoma taking more tax dollars from the state, which is you and I, and putting them, look, when somebody says the state of Oklahoma, what do they mean? The government or the people? And I guess, typically, often colloquially, when we're talking about politics, we mean government, right? When we're talking about saving money for the state of Oklahoma, I don't know. I just think that when government is taking more money from the people of Oklahoma, I think it's a misleading headline. $375 million, right? They prevented $375 million from winding up in your pocket as a result of federal tax reform. So what did Iowa's governor do? What is he calling for? What did he call for in his state of the state, or excuse me, her? The governor of Iowa is Kim Reynolds. In her State of the State address in Iowa, this was her first State of the State address, and Governor Kim Reynolds pointed out that Iowa actually has a different tax code there. It works a little bit differently, and because of that, she's very concerned that the federal tax cuts actually could lead to Iowans paying more state taxes, and Governor Kim Reynolds of Iowa has called on the legislature to rectify that in the state of Iowa and to make sure that along with federal tax cuts, the good people of Iowa also get state tax cuts rather than state tax increases. Which is fascinating, and isn't it? Because all the while we have Oklahoma legislators out there patting themselves on the back saying, isn't it great that we prevented our taxpayers from getting an extra state tax cut as a result of the federal tax cuts? So we'll see, we'll see in Governor Fallon's State of the State address, will she follow in the footsteps of Florida Governor Rick Scott in celebrating the idea of protecting taxpayers from tax increases? Will she follow in the footsteps of Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, trying to make sure that the federal government, the federal tax reform tax cuts aren't, sort of given to the people of Oklahoma with, on one hand, while the state is ripping that money back with the other, right? Will Governor Fallon stand up for taxpayers in her State of the State address and follow in the footsteps of the great governors of Florida and Iowa, or not? We'll see. We're going to find out. Okay. Finally, the State of the Union address, and I have the official description of the tonight's State of the Union address. What is going to be in it? The theme of President Trump's first State of the Union address: building a safe, strong, and proud America. Obviously, the president is going to talk about legislative accomplishments, the primary one being tax reform, which we've just been talking about here on the program, and talk about the economy. A lot to say about the economy. It'll be interesting to see. It's always interesting to see what the opposition party, how the opposition party responds to the president when he talks about things that are good for everybody, right? And I'm always fascinated to follow the words of the speech, because this has become such a sport. And of course, the news stations that cover this, they'll have camera angles that focus on the Democrats in the audience and camera angles that focus on the Republicans in the audience. And, sometimes the members will all sit jumbled up, but usually, and I haven't heard anything different for tonight, they sit on their separate sides. And so it's very easy to tell, who's applauding, who's not applauding. And one of the things that speechwriters have started to do more and more in the modern era is write lines where, the president will say something like, because of the tax reform bill that passed, the stock market is enhancing retirement security for baby boomers, pause for applause, right? And so, you connect something that the opposition party does not want to applaud for, in this case, tax reform, with something that it looks really silly if you don't applaud for it, which is, helping a lot of Americans who are reaching retirement have a better financial future, and try to put those things together and constantly be putting the opposition party in an awkward position, right? Speechwriters do this. If you follow the speech tonight, you're going to see lines crafted. I think we're going to see lines crafted like that try to make it hard for people to not applaud the president, and try to make it hard for people to not appear with their actions to be accepting the fact that the effect that they like is tied to the cause that they don't like. And in some ways, this is the president kicking off his role in the 2018 elections, which is going to be to use the bully pulpit to celebrate where things are, to draw a contrast between what he is trying to do and what he is doing, and what Republicans in Congress are trying to do and what Republicans in Congress are actually getting done, which of course are two separate things. But to try to elevate that contrast as the 2018 elections really get kicked off, and we will see how well he does that, how comfortably he does that, and how much he lays things out in a way that seemed calculated to actually help his party in the 2018 elections, versus is he going to be more focused on himself, more focused on the White House, and less interested in setting out some contrasts and setting out some themes that are going to help the candidates who might actually help him advance his agenda in 2019 and 2020. And obviously that's, most presidents are very invested in the midterm election, because the second half of their term and the part of their term that is looking to their reelection campaign, right, is going to be, a lot of what happens is going to be determined by what happens in the midterm election, and we'll see. I think we'll get maybe a sense tonight of how focused the president seems to be on that, or does he take the position that look, whatever's going to happen in the midterm elections is not his problem, and he'll negotiate with whoever happens to be on the other side of the table. We'll see. I could imagine him taking either position. The 5 issues that they're saying they're going to talk about tonight, obviously, jobs in the economy is number 1. Infrastructure. A lot of people are going to be listening tonight for whether the president is going to sketch out in detail his infrastructure plans. The White House has talked a lot about infrastructure, and there is this, especially to insiders, especially to people involved in the negotiations in Congress, this tantalizing prospect of an infrastructure bill that spreads the money around in such a way that potentially it allows the president to get some other things he wants, coupled with infrastructure legislation. Obviously, there's a lot of questions about whether that would be a budget buster, especially coming on the heels of tax reform, and that's the right question to ask, right? We pointed that out all through the conversations about tax reform. The only way tax reform is serious is if it's followed up with spending restraint. If it's not followed up with spending restraint, then tax reform wasn't serious. And could be devastating, because it could cause the deficits and the debt to continue the unprecedented growth that we experienced during the Obama administration, which ultimately would bankrupt and destroy our country. Most people in Washington D.C. don't think it's really a big deal, but mathematically that would be the consequence. So we have jobs in the economy, infrastructure, immigration, trade, and national security, ending on national security, ending on something that obviously is hard for people to not come together on, at least on a lot of elements of our national security. So no surprise that the president will end on that note. Immigration, I think, is the other big test for the president tonight, because he has an opportunity with a somewhat captive audience to lay out what his immigration priorities and policies actually are, and to get into the weeds enough. And I think the big question is, will he get into the weeds enough? Usually I wouldn't recommend that a president do this, but I think it is incumbent on President Trump tonight to get into the weeds enough on immigration that he allows people to see what the policies actually are. And as we've talked about on the program, if you actually look at what the policies are, a lot of the opposition to them winds up looking pretty silly, or at least out of the mainstream. At least out of the mainstream. If you ask Americans what they want out of an immigration policy, they want something that works. They want something that's relatively straightforward. They don't want something that's random. They want something that serves the interests of Americans, of people who are already here. And they want border security. And if the president's able to lay out something that's clear enough and detailed enough, I think that this could be a turning point in that debate. But it's not easy, perhaps, to do that. I also hope that the president keeps the speech short. I don't understand why presidents think that they should give an hour-long State of the Union address. Why not give a 25-minute State of the Union address? Right? Or it'd probably be hard to go shorter than that, but the idea that they have to give these long speeches with all of this, with all of this detail and all of these stories. It just seems like they could do something a little more concise and maybe attract a little more attention, and maybe make it harder for the news stations to take things out of context, right? The more you talk, the easier it is for people to clip little sound bites and take things out of context. The less you talk, the harder it is for them to do that. So I'm going to leave it there. There's a little bit more here. I will post some thoughts about the State of the Union on the Trent England Show Facebook page. Obviously, you can go and find all of our programs at ocpathink.org. You can also find the live broadcast every day at the YouTube page of the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs and the Facebook page at the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs. That is our primary home for the live video broadcast of the new Trent England Show. Thanks for watching this Tuesday morning. I'm excited to come back tomorrow. We'll have clips, video clips from the State of the Union. So if you can't watch it tonight, you'll get the whole rundown tomorrow on the Trent England Show. But thanks for watching today.